Hello again, everybody. I'm Steve. I'm an alcoholic, and this video is going to be about step 4 in the 12 steps of recovery. It's going to be my experience with step 4, and the suggested reading that goes along with step 4 is pages 64 to 71 in the big book, and of course step 4 in the 12 and 12. Something that I want to note about step 4 that's kind of important is that if you've gotten to this point in your journey on the 12 steps where you've decided that you're going to embark on writing out a step 4 and being honest and thorough about it, then kudos to you, because I've seen a lot of people stop after 3. They do 1, 2, 3, no problem. And then when they get to 4 and they start to get a feel for what step 4 is going to require, ego-wise and humility-wise and honesty-wise, they balk. And it takes a lot of courage to do your step 4. I've written a few of them in my experience, and we're not used to being thoroughly honest as it is required to write a step 4, and your ego typically doesn't like it. So if you're doing it, kudos to you. So step 4 is one of those things that I've seen different details of how to do a step 4 based on different people's sponsorship styles. So I'm going to stick to the bare bones of it. And it's right out of the literature, meaning that it's right out of the big book and it's right out of the 12 and 12. And that's how I did it with my sponsor. And again, the writing is pen to paper for me, in my experience, not a keyboard. There's something cathartic about taking a pen to paper and actually writing in your handwriting. And so go with what your sponsor says. My personal experience is that if it deviates too far from the literature, being the big book and the 12 and 12, then I would be a little apprehensive, but my experience is that it's right out of the book. So another thing to note is that when I sponsor guys, I strongly suggest that when you write a 4th step, you do it all in one sitting, which means I literally, when I wrote a 4th step out, I put it in my calendar and it said this day was blocked off that I was going to write my 4th step, and it's dedicated to that, and I'm not going to do it piecemeal. What I've seen is with other guys is that they piecemeal it and they do it kind of chunk by chunk as through an elongated period of time. And in my experience, sometimes the willingness can go away, and it's not pleasant to stir up all the stuff that you're going to stir up in writing a 4th step. So why not consolidate it all into one day? And then I even put the next day in my calendar, the day after writing a 4th step. I checked with my sponsor and said, are you free on this day? Because I want to do my 5th step the next day. So I suggest that you surgical strike it. Get yourself, shut off your phone, shut your doors, get a comfortable chair and a table, get some snacks, some water, whatever, and a pen and a paper, and say a few prayers and bust it out in an hour, 2 hours, whatever it takes you, but in one sitting, in one session, write your whole 4th step. And then you can sit on it overnight. Maybe you might have forgot something. You can add it on the next day. 5th step with your sponsor, surgical strike. That's my recommendation, not to do it piecemeal over an extended period of time. So the way it's outlined in the big book is we list our resentments. Who are you pissed off at? People, institutions. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's your boss, your parents, family members. Those are good ones. Institutions, your probation officer, the arresting officer, the judge. All these people, places, maybe not a place, but people and institutions that you're angry at, that you're resentful at. List them down in a big list. And then the next column over that you'll see in the big book is cause. Why am I so angry at, such and such? Well, he screwed me over, or he stole money from me, or what have you. And we list next to the resentments why we're resentful at the person, the institution, what have you. And then the third column is it affects my my self-esteem. It affects my sex relations. It affects my financial well-being. And you'll see that in the big book, it points out that they're all just self-centered fears is what they end up being. So it's 3 columns of resentments. You go down, you don't go across. You list them, and then you list what are you resentful about, and then what does it affect inside you? Why are you resentful about it? And it describes all that in the literature. And another thing that I did is that the 4th step in the big book and in the 12 and 12 asks a bunch of questions. Basically, were you selfish about this? Were you selfish about that? Did you steal from this? Did you deprive that? Or questions. And I highlighted them all. The questions that it asks in the big book and in the 12 and 12, I answered them all on pen and paper. And then, excuse me, another thing that my sponsor added on, and I'm glad he did, was what is the one big, deep, dark skeleton in your closet that you never thought that you would ever share with anybody? What's your big, deep, dark secret? Get it out. Write it down on paper. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you have the willingness and you have that willingness to be thoroughly honest and completely honest. Because, as they say, you're only as sick as your secrets, meaning that the success of your step 4 is going to be based on the thoroughness. Are you willing to really open up that closet and dig out those skeletons and get them out in the light and talk about them with your higher power and with another human being, most likely your sponsor? That's rigorous honesty. And the ego doesn't like it. It takes a lot of humility to do that, but it's very transformative and cathartic. Something that's worth noting is that if you're like me, some of your stuff that you're going to write about, you're going to be really apprehensive about putting it on paper and sharing it with anyone because it might be about sex. Well, my experience is, and I've heard this from other sponsors and other speakers, and my experience with sponsoring guys is that half of it anyway is going to be about sex. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's commonplace. One of my friends and that I look up to, kind of an old timer, once said that if it's in the dictionary, it's been done, and it was probably done better than you did it. Was kind of the joke, and basically saying that you don't need to be ashamed about it because it's been done before, and again, it's very commonplace that the stuff that's going to come up in your 4th step and again in your 8th step, if it's about sex, nothing to be ashamed of. I wouldn't worry about it because it was the case with me. It was the case with the guys that I sponsor. And it's what I hear from other sponsors as well. Not details, but it's just, and it even talks about it in the literature too. This isn't me making this up. In the big book and in the 12 and 12, it says, some of us needed a complete overhauling in this area. Issues with sex is a commonplace thing in recovery, and because it ends up being a type of drug, and we're really selfish with it. So again, to emphasize that the success of a 4th step is going to be based on the honesty, the willingness to be totally honest and get everything out there. The inverse of which would be if you've got that one little secret that you're holding on to and you've decided you're never going to talk to anybody about it and nobody can ever know about that one little skeleton. If you have one of those, then you're not ready to do a 4th step yet, based on my experience. And this is my experience of being a sponsee and a sponsor. Because that one little secret that you keep to yourself and you don't write about and you don't share with your higher power and your sponsor is going to be the one that rots and festers and becomes the thorn in your side. And as it says in our literature, it can lead you back to a drink. So if you've got that reservation that you've got stuff that you're not going to share with anyone, then with all due respect, you're probably not ready for a 4th step. So you go back to the step before, which is step 3. Keep praying, keep working your step 3, and hopefully that willingness will come but it's got to be thorough. It's got to be complete. And that's my experience.